developed by my friend Dr. Lori Layden. She's such a beautiful person, and she fell in love with the country of Rwanda. She heard some genocide survivors speak out in California, and she decided to go there and do some work with the orphans who were survivors of that genocide from 1994. Lori is a remarkable person. Not only is she honest through and through, she has the heart of a healer, but also she asked the orphans at Rwanda, what do you need? What do you need from us? And so the first thing they said was, in addition to learning how to tap away their trauma, we need water, because they didn't have running water at the orphanage for 550 people. They had to take an ox cart 2 miles down the road, fill up a big tank, and haul it up the hill. So she did some fundraising and got a well put in. They dug a well for, it took only about $2,000 to put that well in, and then they had running water. We drove up, because I got to contribute to that well a little bit. As we drove up, our translators said, you see that well? It means the headmaster is an honest man. In other words, the $2,000 all went into the well. It didn't go into his pocket. So I knew that the money that we were giving to that organization was being put to use for the actual things. So they got running water. And then when we were there, she asked them, well, now what do you want? And of all things, they wanted electricity. Things that we take for granted. They had no electricity at their school, so they're close to the equator. Sun came up at 6 and went down at 6, and they had no way to study at night. So they got electricity. So Lori takes a team there about once a year, and they do healing work. She also did a program called Train the Trainers. She picked leaders from among the students at the orphanage, taught them EFT, taught them how to teach other people EFT, and then they did the work with those other students. What the headmaster noted was that before Lori came, at least once a week, somebody in the dorm would start screaming, having a flashback of the genocide, and then pretty soon everybody in the whole dorm was screaming. And after the EFT training, in the whole year, they only had like 2 times when that happened. So there was a significant decrease in the trauma of the survivors. Well, I took French in high school, but I never really could get it, and I studied some German, which was very handy when I studied at the Jung Institute for 3 years, and I got I could communicate in German, kind of like broken English, my broken German. I knew to get really fluent in a language, I'd have to use it. I took Spanish in college and then spent a summer in Central America, which is really the way to learn a language, just immerse yourself in it. After I married for the first time, the father of my children and I went to New York City. It was during the Vietnam War, and we were conscientious objectors. He did not want to go fight, but we went into the inner city slums in the South Bronx. We worked for a Spanish Mennonite church, so I heard a lot of Spanish. And then later, in 1987, when I was studying at the Jung Institute, I got a job offer as a bilingual therapist. Well, I had heard a lot of Spanish. I could understand it well. I hadn't spoken all that much, but I knew this was a chance to really get my Spanish improved by using it, so I took the job. It was in the city of Worcester, Massachusetts, spelled Worcester, Massachusetts. And the head of the clinic was a student at the Carl Jung Institute in Boston. So he heard about me at the Carl Jung Institute in Zurich and offered me a job. And I said, well, yes, I'll take that job. So I found I could listen to someone with my inner knowing and understanding, and sometimes I'd get the meaning of what they said even though I didn't get all the words. So I'd check it out and I'd ask, did you say you climbed up a tree and set yourself on fire? And she said, sí, señora, fue así. Yeah, that's what I did. I said, okay, I just wanted to check out that I understood. And I found that the language just flowed. It was as if something inside of me already knew it. I think I had a past life where I spoke the language and I could draw on that. And I loved the language and loved the people. So it was a great experience. As a social worker, I need to do what's culturally appropriate in that situation. So in Rwanda, it was interesting that they did not have a concept that if you tap on your eyebrows, you can release trauma because it rebalances the bladder meridian. Their concept of what heals was, it was a Christian orphanage. Jesus heals everything. Prayer heals everything. So we started out with prayer and asked God and Jesus to help us heal. We did our centering and our focusing, and we tapped asking Jesus to help us. And at the end, we gave thanks to Jesus and God for the healing, because that fit into their framework. Now, I know that the tapping methods were given through God for healing of the planet, but I didn't try to push the idea that the tapping was what was doing the healing. Also, if you heal with the help of a transpersonal figure, it goes much faster and much deeper because of that influx of divine light into the process. When I worked in the Hispanic community, they would come in and tell me, well, Uncle Jose died 2 months ago and we had a family dinner, and at the dinner his picture fell off the wall and we all thought he was there saying, pay some attention to me. And so I said, very interesting, and took it as truth because that culture believes in spirits, in the activity of spirits after death. And I did not say, I think you need to see the psychiatrist and get some antipsychotic medication. So I just work in the flow of the culture of whatever they believe and try to keep it congruent with how they believe healing happens, because it all comes from inside anyway. Yes. Mm. We had lectures at the Carl Jung Institute during several months of each season, fall and winter, spring, and then we'd have long vacation times. And everyone there went to analysis twice a week. You usually worked with a male analyst and a female analyst. And we had friendships with others, and we'd get together and talk about our stuff, about our dreams, about what we were learning. And the model for study is different in Europe than it is here. At the end of 2 years, there was an exam called the Propaedeuticum exam. and you had a reading list, and so you studied that whole 2 years. You read, you did depth work, and half of it was your own analysis. Figuring out yourself was half the training to become a Jungian analyst. So I loved it there. I loved being in Europe. The second year I was there, my daughter came over. I had only planned to go for a year, but my dream said stay longer. So second year, my daughter came. Third year, my son came. I just have 2 children. And that third year, when we were both of my children were there, we traveled all over Europe. Every vacation, we'd hop on a train and go to Spain or Italy or France or England. We went to Egypt. Oh, it was amazing. We saw the pyramids. My mom would come over sometimes and travel with us. It was magical. I did not become a Jungian analyst. I came back home before that happened, and I'm glad now that I didn't, because the Jungian model is you go to analysis 4 to 5 times a week for 5 to 10 years, and then you're done. And with the energy therapies, we can often clear one trauma in one session. It doesn't take as long, and I would not want to be locked into the Jungian model of how long things have to take. It gave me a real appreciation for what's going on in the subconscious mind, what unconscious things are going on that I can read in the dreams. But energy psychology gave me a way to read what's going on in the subconscious mind with muscle testing. You have someone hold out their arm, and lock indicates it's true, unlock indicates it's not true. And Jung was the one whose research was behind the lie detector test to find out what's true and what's not true. Now we have more streamlined ways to get to that information. Muscle testing is an art, very definitely. Objectivity is difficult. There are many factors that go into increasing accuracy. Probably one of the first factors is where you are on David Hawkins' scale of consciousness that goes from downer emotions like shame, fear, guilt, to upper emotions, which is courage, reason, love, joy, and peace. The higher your spiritual vibration, and the more you are free of fear and anger and those downer things and shame, the higher your vibration, the more accurate your testing gets. So if you have a client who's really living in fear, and they try to muscle test, they are going to be reversed. We call it, when fear comes up, that things go backward and you get the opposite answer. So it's not going to work right for them. The second thing is that a therapist and the client both need to be blank slate, no bias on what the answer is. Even if you're muscle testing, chocolate is good for me. You have to not predispose yourself either way, because if you have a bias, your muscle testing will lean in the direction of that bias. Also, if you have a toxic load in your system of alcohol for one thing, or you're too hot, or you're too cold, or you're too tired, or for me, when I get too hungry, I can feel my system move into reversal. And then I don't get anything right with my testing. I know when I feel hangry, for hungry and angry, that I can't test under those circumstances. You also need to be hydrated. When I get too dry, I don't test right. So always with a muscle testing, you need to ask, is this correct? Does it feel right? Is it helpful? So I think muscle testing is great for figuring out which point to tap on next. And in the diagnostic procedure, we do a lot of that, of muscle testing for where's the right point, or muscle testing for what negative life beliefs may be blocking the whole process. And muscle testing doesn't work right if you are not in your center. It will not be as accurate. So to get good muscle testing results, you have to be centered, you have to be hydrated, and then there's technique of how much pressure you apply. And with intuitive people, sometimes we think we know the answer before we test, but we have to put that aside and not go with that and just be blank. Let me see what this person's body indicates. There was a study done by Wolpe et al. With machines to do the pressure, and they discovered that when a person was giving a response that was congruent with what they believed was true, the muscle was 17% stronger than one that was not true, and it lasted longer. So there's a lot about technique, and you really sort of have to go to a workshop to learn really good muscle testing technique. Well, to start off with, to do a test in the clear, I say meet my pressure, or hold firm. I try not to say resist, because resistance is a dirty word in psychotherapy. It means you're trying to sabotage your results. Probably my favorite self-test to teach is the one where on your dominant side you lift the dominant knee a few inches off the floor, push on it with your dominant hand, and say a true statement like, my name is Barbara Stone. I push on that knee and it holds strong. My name is Jane Doe, and I push on that and it goes down. Another really easy one is the tilt test, where you stand in your center and you say a true statement. We are today in the month of November, and the body goes forward for something that's true. We are today in the month of April, and the body goes back for something that's not true. That's a whole body tilt test that might be easy for someone. But before you start testing yourself, you need to be sure you're centered, that your motives are pure, and that you have no bias about the outcome. I did not have a bias about November versus April, even though I long for spring. The very hardest thing I ever went through in my whole life was the decision to leave my marriage to the father of my two children. My children were 4 and 7 at the time. And I was in a Mennonite church, and the Mennonites disapproved of divorce very strongly. There was only one person in the whole church that was divorced, and her husband ran off to Europe with his secretary. And she did not remarry until he died. So it was a breaking of what I believed. I thought if I could just be a good wife and obey and, follow the rules, that the marriage would work, but it didn't. And I had the feeling that I was going to die if I didn't get out of that situation. And it was hard because it hurt my children. They loved their father, and the separation from him was hard on them. So that was when I went inside for the first time in my life and connected directly to spirit and asked what to do. And my inner guidance said that I did have permission to leave. So I did. That was the toughest thing I ever went through. I think the problems that led up to that divorce were what seeded my cancer, which came about a decade later. And it takes about 10 years for one mutated cancer cell to grow into a tumor of 1 centimeter to where you can find it. So cancer was hard, but it did not have the social stigma that divorce had. And it was mitigated by the night before my surgery. I found the lump myself, and that was a synchronicity, an amazing synchronicity, which I'll tell you about because I know you are interested in synchronicities. My daughter and I went to ballet class. There were about 10 people in the class, and one night we went and nobody else came. Nobody in the whole class came. And I wanted to dance anyway, because being an ex-Mennonite, Mennonites are not allowed to dance, and so I enjoyed it doubly. But our teacher was sad, and so I did my social work thing of listening to her. She told us that her mom had been pregnant with her when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And the doctor said, abort, get chemotherapy, save your life. And her mother said, no, I will give life to my child. And she did. And she died not too long after my dance teacher was born. Her older sister had the same thing. Her older sister had one child pregnant with the second one when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she made the same choice. I will give life to my child, and her older sister had just died, and she said, I know I'm going to get it. I know I'm going to get it too. It was the hereditary kind of breast cancer. And all of a sudden, breast cancer got real to me. I had had a mammogram several months before because I had just remarried 1 month before that, and the mammogram was fine and the physical examination was fine. But I went home and I did a self-test, and I found the lump. Now, how spirit kept everybody else away from my dance class that night, I don't know. I don't know what happened to them all, but I caught the lump just in time where it hadn't had a chance to metastasize to the rest of the body. And I don't do regular exams. I wasn't doing regular exams, but spirit just made it real, and I caught it early enough it could be treated. The night before my surgery, when I knew it was malignant, I was praying for help because I was 42 at the time. And when a young person has cancer, it's worse than when an older person gets it. Because in an older person, the body is sluggish, the cancer is sluggish, it takes a while to grow. But in a young, vital person, and I was a health nut, I exercised and ate well and did crystal meditation. In a young person, the cancer has more vitality, grows faster, spreads faster. Plus, it was estrogen negative, which meant that the hormone therapies wouldn't work to help it. So I saw my funeral as a possibility. And in that moment, I changed my mind. Up until then, I was thinking, life on this planet is just too hard. People are too mean to each other, and I'd like to go back home. But when I got my ticket home with this lump in my breast, I changed my mind. I said, I don't want to go home that way. Cancer is not a fun way to die. So that night before surgery, I was praying for help. And in my mind's eye, I saw Jesus come. Because Jesus is a face that love wears for me. That's from my tradition. Jesus came, stood in front of me, tapped on my sternum, and communicated a message. It wasn't auditory, it was a knowing, but a complete thought. I now heal your soul. And there is a tap on my sternum. And I felt a deep wound of pain in my soul heal. And I was filled with joy. And I absolutely knew with my soul healed, my body would heal too. My body would follow suit. So in the hospital after my surgery, my boss came in to see me. She said, "How are you doing, Barbara?" I said, "Great." I said, "Jesus came and tapped on me and healed my soul. And I'm going to get over this." And she said, "Nice doggy." No. She said, actually, she was a very spiritual person, and she got it. She said, "That's wonderful, Barbara. That's really wonderful." And that was 27 years ago. I'm 69. I'm going to be 70 next month. And so I've had time to witness the birth of 5 grandchildren, and I love my life. I am so grateful. So that was my first experience with tapping. Jesus tapped on my thighs. No. Yes, in my book, Cancer as Initiation, Surviving the Fire, that was the first book I published. I was in the middle of a doctoral program when I got my diagnosis, and I was trying to pick my dissertation thesis. They said, pick something that's vital to you, because only 40% of people who finish their coursework ever get their dissertation done. So the only thing I could think about was surviving cancer, so I wrote on surviving cancer. And it starts out with dreams. I was keeping a dream journal. And yes, and I was in Jungian analysis. And the 2 themes that came up were snakes and pregnancy. There were snakes all around the house. There were snakes crawling over the windows. And the snake is the symbol of the Greek god of healing, Asclepius. He has a pole with a snake wrapped around it. The snake is a symbol of the Kundalini that rises around the spine, the 2 intertwined snakes. I didn't know that at the time, and the snakes were kind of scary. But there was a deep soul healing in progress. The other repeated dream I had was that I was pregnant. And I couldn't figure that one out until I was doing the study for my thesis. And it talked about the physiology of cancer. What does the tumor do to escape the immune system attack? It's something that's growing there fast, is not supposed to be there. Well, it mimics the chemistry of a fetus. It says, "I'm a baby, don't get rid of me." And of course, the immune system isn't going to get rid of a baby. So I kept dreaming I had a baby in there. But as a metaphor, I started a different life after cancer. My biggest lesson, and if everybody who's listening to this wants to get the lesson without the cancer, I'll tell you the secret. It was to love myself. I knew how to love other people, but I didn't know how to receive love. And I had to learn that. And I think I've learned the lesson now. My 3rd marriage. Yes. Well, the 2nd marriage, it was 1 month after I married my 2nd husband that I got the diagnosis. No, that I found the lump, and 3 months to the day after the wedding that I got the diagnosis. It probably was really important to me that I had that kind of support, because to get through breast cancer, there are 3 factors that are the most important to survival. One is financial stability. Imagine that. If you have to worry about money, that detracts from the healing you can do. Second is prior health history. If you weren't healthy before cancer, it's not likely to improve your health. And I was in good health before that. The 3rd factor is having a transpersonal experience of healing. An angel comes and touches you, or in my case, Jesus touched your heart and healed me. And I had all 3 of those going for me. And my second husband was very supportive of that. We actually grew apart, and there came a time when we had to go separate ways. I was single for 12 years after that, before I met my husband, and this is his third marriage too. And actually, the third marriage statistics are better than the first and better than the second. It's 75% passed. Yeah, fourth marriage isn't so good, but third marriage is really the charm. We're both grown-ups now. And we have a common mission. He is a psychiatrist. His name is Robert Alcorn. But he also has shamanistic training. So he understands there's a spiritual world behind what looks like mental disorders. Sometimes it's the attachment of somebody else's energy, somebody who died and got stuck between the worlds and is attached to that person. Sometimes it's a curse or a hex. Sometimes it's past life trauma or the invasion of an outside entity. So we work together and learn from each other, and it's delightful. My husband is a remarkable man. He has a well-developed feminine side, the ability to feel. He's brilliant too. He's really smart. But he nurtured his feeling side, and he was called by his dreams to go and study with a hands-on energy healer. So he learned how to read energy with his hands, how to send energy, and for a psychiatrist. Plus, he's had a deep desire to talk to spirit directly. His life is about spirituality. It's in his natal chart. His sun sign and his spiritual sign are right on top of each other. He's like Mr. Spirituality. And my dream man was someone I could pray with. So every day we pray together. And we talk about what we need and give thanks for what we have, and we help each other with our cases. And if one of us gets something attached to us, we say, "I'd like some help, please," and the other one helps them. It's really a soulmate relationship, and it's a great treasure in my life. I am so grateful for this kind of connection. And so we're both older, but I can't live in fear of losing him. So every day I say, thank you for one more day of marriage. We've been married 2.5 years. Yeah. Well, the first time we crossed paths was at ICEAM. I gave a talk and he came to my talk, and I actually saw him in the hallway, and I thought, what a distinguished looking person. But there were 100 people at my talk, and we were each in other relationships, and we didn't connect there. But I heard about him through colleagues. I heard that Robert Alcorn had a video where he was helping a woman release the spirit of her great-grandmother, and there was a photograph of the spirit as it came out. I thought, wow, this is my kind of man. I had written a book on earthbound spirit release. He's doing it and has a picture of the spirit. So I really wanted to see that video, and I read an article about him in Bridges Magazine, where he was talking about his work, and I thought, wow. So a colleague, a soul detective student who had also studied some shamanism with him, called me up and said, Robert Alcorn's going to speak at a meeting of the Ohio Metaphysical Society, and I want to schedule him at a time when you can come, because I was going to Costa Rica in the winter. So we got the day when we could both be there, and then he needed to use my projector for his video. So I brought that, and I saw him, and he was just amazing. But I thought he was married, because it said in his book, which we traded books afterward, dedicated to his wife. And I read in the on his website something about his wife. I thought, wow, he's just too delicious. I'm going to close the book on that because I don't want to be involved with a married man who's that gorgeous and perfect for me. So I closed the door, and then a psychic, an intuitive, gave me a reading, and she said there's someone out there that would be perfect for you, and it would be a long-term relationship. Your work would support each other, and his name is Robert. So, do you know any Roberts? I said, well, I know a handsome one, but I think he's married. She said, well, check it out. So I thought, do I email Bob and say, are you married? I thought that would be a little obvious, but I figured out how to do it subtly. I emailed him and I said, how is it for your wife, for you being a traditionally trained psychiatrist, to publish a book about working with spirits? He saw right through that, and he wrote back and said, I'm no longer married. My divorce is final, and I'm available. Yes, he was an hour and a half away from where I lived, Ohio. So I said, oh, I happen to be available too. And he asked me out. He said, we read each other's book. That was the prelude to the romance. And he said, I feel like I found a kindred spirit. That's very much how it feels. I did. Yeah. After I had cancer, I prayed this prayer. Now, don't ever do this if you don't want to take the consequences. I said, God, you gave me back my life. My life is yours. I dedicate it to you. Use me as you will. Not what would be the most comfortable for me, but what's most needed. And then a woman came into my practice who said she was the survivor of satanic ritual abuse. Well, she told me horrifying stories, and then she asked me to write about it. And it took me a long time to do that. It took me 20 years to write her story. I call her Paula in the book. That's not her real name, but I did write her story. She pushed me to learn energy therapies because talk therapy didn't work for her. And she had a fracturing of her personality. Back then we called it multiple personality. So I went to a support group to find out how to deal with dissociation. And they told me learn energy therapies. So I started learning energy therapies to help myself with my vicarious traumatization, just listening to the stories, and to help her heal. Well, nothing worked for her because I found out later that as a cult survivor, she was programmed that anything that was supposed to help her would make her feel worse instead of better. There was a reversal programming put into her system. And I tried to have her do this. I totally love and accept myself. And she went, I don't love myself. I hate myself. I thought, oh, well, that therapy isn't going to work either. And then I learned you could just do this and say, I really want to feel better. I wish I could feel better. Or you could just do this without saying anything. But the thing that worked for her was Reiki. And I was trained in Reiki. Somehow that flew under the radar of the cult programming. The hands-on healing worked for her. So we worked together, and I got introduced to earthbound spirits through her. Her father was a cult member and had died before we started working together. One day she came in, and the room got freezing cold. I put on my winter coat, and it was really cold. I had learned let her start. So she said, my father's spirit is attached to me. And I'm thinking holy four-letter words. we got a ghost here. I knew because it was so cold, and this ghost was a satanic cult member, not just a regular ghost of Uncle Joe. It was a cult member. So I kind of freaked out in that moment, and I prayed, help, I need some help here. And then just perfect peace came into the room, and I associate that with the presence of my guardian angels. And I knew what to do. Now, I didn't have any courses in ghost busting in my doctoral program or my master social work program. But I had heard about this Gestalt technique where you put an empty chair for somebody you want to work with who's not there. So I said, well, if Dad came to therapy today, let's talk to Dad. We pulled up an empty chair for her father, and she intuited a conversation between the two of them, and she did some forgiveness work that day. And what happens if you are a therapist and you deal with something out of the ordinary and it's successful, the spirit guides of that person text the spirit guides of everybody else with and they say, go to this person. So earthbound spirits started popping up in my practice all over the place. And I had to figure out, what am I going to do with these ghosts? So I was learning the tapping therapies. And I tried it out with a client's father. He had some remorse at that point. He was a little different after he had died. I know now I could have done some work with him with the dark things that invaded him, but I didn't know how to do that at the time. I was still learning. But then with a different woman whose father was nice to her and was dead and just hadn't moved on, I thought, well, if he's attached to her and she does the energy tapping, will he get the benefit? Because it's like he's linked in. So I started trying that. If there's an earthbound spirit attached, have my client tap for the problems of the earthbound spirit, and it worked. Yeah. But if like the ghost is melded into your system and you tap, they're getting it because of that attachment. It's even deeper than a surrogate. When I tap for my living sister who's in a different state, that's surrogate tapping. But if her spirit were in me, then I tap and she gets it. Well, it seemed to work very, very well. And my strategy is not to just say go to the light, but to heal the trauma that prevented them from going. Heal whatever got disturbed, have my client channel intuitively what's going on with this person, do the tapping, and then help them cross to the light. And I noticed that when they do that crossing, there's like a golden hue that comes in the room, a feeling of deep peace and joy, sometimes some tears in there too, but tears of joy. It's like the most delicious feeling to see someone who's been stuck here go into the next world and reconnect with their loved ones. So, I learned that from the experience with Paula, and I had to learn how to deal with dark forces, what to do. I had always prayed, God, keep those evil spirits away from me. I don't want to deal with them. But then I read Richard Baldwin's book, Healing Lost Souls. And he had a program. I think I have the title right. I'm not sure. He had a program where if he were working with someone and like a woman and he's talking to her and a voice came out and said, leave her alone, she's mine, then he knew there was a dark force entity in her. And he said, well, hello, what's your job with this person and who do you work for, the darkness or the light? He'd have them look in their center, find the spark of the Creator's light in their own center, focus on it, it expands, and then offer them a better job working for the light. And it worked to actually transform that spirit. Now, that's not something traditional Christian churches believe. They think demons are unredeemable, and you have to cast them out and throw them in hell and lock them up forever. That's, in Jungian terms, dissociating from one's shadow. You split it off, lock it up. This is going into the shadow, bringing light into the darkness, and getting that fallen angel reconnected to source so they can start being a good angel again, and then they don't come back. I had to add a few things to the protocol, like find out how they got in, because if you don't heal that wound that they entered through, some more will come. And I realized I needed to be centered and in sacred space to do that work, so it was safe. But I added a few things, and it worked very well. And well, in my soul detective training, the different kinds of things we work with, in addition to earthbound spirits and obsessive spirits, which would be a ghost with an agenda to hurt you, we also work with jinn, popularly known as genies, which are fire elemental spirits. We work with other elemental spirits, angry fairies, leprechauns. And then I hesitate to say this because in the psychological community it's considered crazy, but there's also what I've found, the invasion of things that feel like they're not from this planet, that they're extraterrestrial programs. And one of the 4 ET species that the former Canadian Prime Minister of Defense, Paul Hellyer, talked about was the insectoid races. And I have found upon occasion that things that look like insects have invaded my clients. So I ask for spiritual help to deal with those. Yeah, there's a wide variety of things that can invade, but I try to tailor a program for each one to meet the needs of that invasive energy, because it's all about energy. They want to steal my client's energy. Get them connected to a better energy source so they leave my client alone. I have worked with some abductees, yes. That's a big question. The first ET abductee that I worked with, he was quite a remarkable man. He showed me the scar in his arm where they had put in an implant to track him. He said they would take him and his sister up on the ship. They would do experiments on them, and he made friends with one of them. And that ET talked about how they were trying to hybridize a race, that this was a scientific endeavor not meant to hurt them. And then they would take a magnet and try to wipe the memory of it from them. But it never quite completely wiped for this man. So he would have bleed through, and when he would walk into a freezer, like a walk-in freezer, he'd have a flashback because it was so cold on the ship. And he had some trouble functioning, knowing there was this other world. But he was an amazing man. They were the Greys, yes. Well, what I do when I have a problem I don't know what to do with, and I'm in sacred space with somebody, I ask for volunteers. Who in the whole company of heaven. One of my students has that word, the whole company of heaven. That means everybody. Who knows how to deal with this? And sometimes somebody from the Pleiades will come. Sometimes there's a volunteer from the angelic realm with an expertise. Sometimes there is an ET that comes. Sometimes there's a 10th dimensional person that comes. So I take whatever help I can get. That is such an important question. It is addressed in a documentary called Thrive by Foster Campbell and his wife. Thrive, Thrive. And it talks about, this is what's really brought me some hope, about there are some pilots who were carrying a nuclear warhead, and an ET craft appeared to the side and went zap, 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 and disarmed their nuclear warhead. Also, in the Cuban Missile Crisis of the early 60s, we had a whole bunch of nuclear warheads aimed at Cuba, and an ET appeared and went zap, 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 disarmed them all. It's like the ETs know that nuclear war damages our atmosphere terribly, and it also causes a rip in time and space, and it affects all the planets in our solar system. It affects things in our galaxy. It's not just if we decide to blow ourselves up and we're gone. No, it has a ripple effect of damage to other civilizations too. So it's like those ETs said, you guys are like a little kid playing with a laser gun. You don't know how to use that, and we're not going to let you. They have also possibly foiled nuclear tests, made them fizzle. And yeah. And I appreciate that help. I really appreciate it. I feel like there is a lot of benevolent presence that cares about us and is giving us more time so that we can mature, so we can settle our how to get along with each other through nonviolent means. And that's very much in line with my Mennonite pacifist thinking. There has to be a way to settle this without killing, because here's the thing. If I have an enemy and I shoot my enemy dead, his spirit is going to follow me around and try to make trouble for me. It's going to have a ghost attached to me. That doesn't really solve my problem. It's much better if I make a friend out of my enemy. It's about dealing with dark force entities and about how the dark force programs got into our culture. And I could talk for hours on that, but I'm just going to let that go. And the third part is called Hope for Humanity. And it goes into the source of that and how we were programmed to be a slave species and how we can step out of that into the fullness of our true selves. And instead of looking to our hierarchy for answers, the priest, the bishop, the cardinal, the pope, going directly to source, getting plugged into our true self. And that is the safest place to be, standing in your own power, directly connected to source. Yes. Invisible roots. Well, actually, transforming fear into gold is number 3, but invisible roots is the second one. That deals with 2 topics. One is past life trauma. It gives the soul detective protocol for that. If somebody already knows muscle testing and centering, they could use that protocol on their clients, and I think it would work. If you don't know those other skills, then you would need training. I do teach that. And there are 10 case histories where the origin of the problem was a past life trauma. The second topic is earthbound spirits. Past life trauma is my past life trauma. Earthbound spirits is somebody else's past life trauma. And it's an invisible root of things. If there's a ghost or an earthbound spirit, another name for it, a wayward spirit, that couldn't get to the light because to get to heaven, you can't take any baggage. The baggage limits are 0. Even if you pay, you can't take any baggage. You can't take anger, guilt, terror, revenge, fear. You can't take any of that stuff. So when people die and they're filled with those negative emotions, they're too heavy to float up to the higher dimension. And it gives a protocol for helping earthbound spirits cross to the light. Yes, I'll tell you the first client that ever came to this that I realized that's what it was. She had a phobia of driving on the road in traffic. So it took her a long time to get to my house because she couldn't use the interstate. She had to go around back roads. So I was learning tapping, and I learned Roger Callahan's 5-minute phobia cure. You tap under the eyes, rebalance stomach, under the arms, rebalance spleen, under the collarbone, rebalance kidney. And we did it. We tapped away her phobia. And she left. She came back the next week. Her phobia was back. So we tapped it away again, and it left. And the next week she came back, and it was back. So I'm saying to myself, now, I'm doing what's normal to release a phobia, and it's not working. And that's a sign of past life trauma. When you do the treatments that normally fix something and they're not fixed, it could be because there's a past life trauma behind it. So I asked her, well, what do you think about past life trauma? She's about reincarnation. Do you think we might have other lives? And she said, well, I don't know, but I'm willing to check it out. So I said, well, let's muscle test and see if there's past life trauma behind this. And her body indicated there was. So I said, could we work on this? And she said, well, sure. So through a combination of muscle testing to get the framework, we found out in a past life she had been a girl of about 16 years old. And she's going out to meet her lover, and she's coming down the stairway of their mansion, petticoats flying. She gets in her buggy. It's raining out, and she's going to meet her beloved. And she comes around a corner, and there's another buggy in the path. They crash. She's thrown out. Her lung is damaged. And over the course of 3 days, she dies thinking, I didn't get married. I didn't get to connect with my lover. I'm only 16. I've been cheated. So this lifetime, she didn't have that fear of driving on the highway till she saw her mom dying of a lung disease. And then the phobia came in. Lung disease, driving on the highway is not safe to be in traffic. So we did a healing for that past life trauma and showed that young woman that she got to come back in this life. She got to marry and have children. And we crossed her to the light. Then my client says to me, well, I have a horse and buggy, but I only drive it around the driveway. I never drive it on the road. So we had desensitized that fear. So we decided to test it out. So I did a Roger Callahan intervention. I got in the car with her. She tapped for her fear, and we went to the interstate. I said, if you need to stop and tap, we can do that. But we drove, and she's tapping under her eye the whole time, and she desensitized her fear, and it never came back, because we got to the origin of it from that past life. So unexplained phobias is a big sign that there could be past life trauma involved with something. Well, I muscle test to get the framework. And what my book says is first I test for gender. In that life, I was male or female. How long did they live? A muscle test for that number. Cause of death, illness, accident, act of war, whatever. And then date of birth and place of birth. Once they have those details, then I ask them to go to the happiest time in that life. And that's a way to get in. We really want the worst time, but if you try to go directly there, it's just too traumatic. So we go around the back door, go to the happiest time, get a link to that Akashic record, and then they take over with what happened. Just what were you experiencing? And from there on, it's them channeling their own past life. I don't do it for them. They channel it. Once they get that framework, they can link in to what happened, do the healing work, and resolve it. I have a lot of past lives, yeah. Well, see, I grew up Mennonite. I didn't believe in reincarnation. It was a heresy, but I was in dream analysis, and in one of my dreams, a scribe read to me a list of who I'd been in past lives. Well, I woke up and I thought, but I don't believe in past lives, but I do believe in dreams. And one of the names on that list was Simone de Beauvoir, a French author who wrote a book called The Second Sex. Yeah. So I looked her up and she was still living. I thought, well, that proves my dream is wrong. She can't be a past life because she's still alive. Since then, I've learned we can overlap lifetimes so that there are parallel lives going on at some time. So now I'm this little Mennonite girl, and Simone is in a sexual threesome with Jean Paul Sartre and another woman. And to my Mennonite value system, I didn't get threesomes. And she smoked like a chimney, and she never married. And it's like she was so different. But the thing is, she wrote a book that rocked French society on its heels, and she stood up for the value of women. And whether it's true that my soul decided, well, I'm going to try it without God and see how well that goes, and it didn't go all that well. Or if I was actually her and learned what I learned. I knew I had to write a book this lifetime. I just didn't know what to write about it till I got cancer, and then I wrote about that. So I do work out of the box a lot of what traditional society is thinking, and I have had some opposition for that, especially around the ET material. Some people just are so unwilling to accept that there might be other intelligent life and it might be impacting ours, that they deny the whole thing and ridicule people who have that experience or believe it might be true. So I try to keep open to what my clients bring me and go with it, whether it's metaphor or true. What we're after is healing the emotional wounds, and it doesn't matter if the past life was literal or figurative, and I need to heal the same emotions that she had. But I did some work with Simone de Beauvoir because she hadn't crossed to the light. And when I got her to the light, it was like I could breathe easier. Well, yeah, she didn't have a concept of a transpersonal world. And she died sad and alone and angry and full of nicotine and not filled with joy. She was too heavy to float up to heaven. Mm. Well, it's interesting because the Chinese tradition of 5,000 years mapped the energy flow in lines, meridian lines, and the Indian system mapped it in wheels. They're more feminine, and round things are feminine. So wheels of energy, the chakras. But I think we have both, that we have meridians, we have chakras. And I respect the work of Barbara Brennan. I love her diagrams of things in the energy field in her book, Hands of Light. I might not quite agree with everything about the interfaces she has between the chakras, but I think her work is very valuable. Yes. Well, I'm a mom. Hey, there's a cord of love from my heart to my daughter and to my son and to all of my grandkids and my husband and my parents. There's a cord of love there that's never going to stop, whether they're dead or alive. That love is there. And I also consciously ask to be corded to my guardian angel. I say, Guardian angel, I need some help here. Please send me a beam of help. And that's a positive energetic cord. There's nothing damaging about that. Now, between parents and children, if I would send a cord from my solar plexus of control to one of my children and try to make him do what I think they should do with their lives, that is not appropriate. That would be detrimental, trying to interfere with a grown-up's free will. Now, a 2-year-old, you have to tell them, don't touch the hot stove. Don't do that. But when they're grown, they have free will. So cords can be beneficial or detrimental. People who are very depleted energetically, they're hungry for energy, and they will consciously or unconsciously cord somebody who's high energy. It's like they stick a straw in your solar plexus because they're so needy and they suck on it. So that's not so much fun when you get drained energetically. And other times people will cord other people consciously because they want to control them for something or other. And those things aren't good. And when that comes up in my practice, I try to identify where the cords are, and then I ask a being of light to disconnect the cord and heal both parties. I would never try to do it myself, because if I tried to remove a cord from my client who is getting sucked dry and I pulled that cord out, the person on the other end is going to cord me, and I don't want that. So I asked the being of light to do it. Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. Yes. 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 Great. Well, that's interesting, because what I've often done, say there's an ex-husband courting somebody for power, I will have the person ask their guardian angel to unplug it from their solar plexus and plug it into the heart of his guardian angel, so that he needs energy, and there's a source of energy which would be 24/7 nurturance. Yes, same. Yes, exactly the same principle. Give the person who's doing the courting something even better to get my client literally off the hook, off the hook. Well, that's another very long topic, but I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version here. the sending of those curses and hexes, or a death spell, like you try to kill somebody, is a dangerous thing to do for two reasons. One, if you send a death spell and it doesn't stick, it bounces right back to you right away and it kills you. But whatever you send to anybody else bounces back karmically anyway. If you curse somebody else, you wind up cursing yourself too. That's just the law of energy. That's why it's good to bless other people, because that rains down blessings upon your own life. Also, the sending of the evil eye, we'll go to the worst case scenario, a death spell, the evil eye. You give somebody the evil eye and then they wither and die. That only works if you believe it's going to work and they believe it's going to work. If you both believe it's going to work and they send you the evil eye, then you're dead soon. But if you don't believe in that, it doesn't work. As an example, when I was in Rwanda, our translator had 6 siblings. His father asked for something from his ancestors, and they said, we'll give it to you, and you have to sacrifice a bull to us. So he said, okay, deal. He got the thing, and then he reneged on sacrificing the bull. It was expensive, you know. After that, all 6 of his other siblings died within a year of different causes. And that was a curse from his ancestors, who were angry that he didn't give them the bull. So I asked him, well, you're obviously not dead. How come it didn't get you? This curse didn't fall on you. He said, oh, that's easy. The blood of Jesus Christ covers me, and that curse couldn't touch me. So it was his faith in his spiritual figure that made him immune to it. He didn't believe it could touch him, and he was very much alive. So that's part of a curse. Also, if a practitioner wants to curse somebody, they have to study your energy field, remote view, and find a crack in your armor where they can send it in. So a way to avoid curses is to heal your own wounds, deal with your feelings, resolve your traumas, forgive yourself and everybody else, and it gives you a stronger aura so those things can't come in. My colleague Judith Swack has a curse protocol. She has a curse training, and she has a very differentiated approach to how the curses can get in. Hexes are more consciously configured to cause damage to somebody, and it depends on how much psychic energy the sender gives to that hex and whether it gets a way to get in. That's my belief system. I think that, yes. Well, more like a hex of a jilted lover. Her sweetheart breaks up with her, marries somebody else, and she puts a hex on that other woman that she'll never have children. Or if she does, they'll get sick and die, or, you know, something specific like that. And often a hex will be done by a practitioner of the dark arts, black magic. Somebody pays them to do that. And then both the person who pays for it and the sender, they both get bad karma for that. It's not a good idea. It always comes back to the person. Yeah. It's a radical idea in the history of humanity that each person could link directly to God. What we were taught is that we have to go through an intermediary. For instance, in the Catholic Church, only the Pope has a pipeline to God, to talk to God. The Pope tells the cardinals what God says. They tell the bishops, they tell the priests, they tell the parishioners. And somebody like Joan of Arc, who talks directly to God, is burned at the stake. That's not approved of because there's a hierarchy for control, and I'm going to call it what I think it is control, of controlling of human behavior. So the concept of true self is that every person has a spark of the Creator within them, and we can link through that spark directly to divinity, to source, by whatever name you want to call it. And the characteristic of that source is unconditional love, pure unconditional love. You don't have to earn it, you can't buy it, it's just there because we are creations of the divine. And when we plug in directly to source for guidance, then we will be guided to what's truly best for our own lives. We'll stand in our power. And it's the safest place to be. No dark entity can overcome you when you're standing in your power. No ET, no nothing. When you're in your power, you have your divine right to sovereignty. So there. Well, the family as a whole has a soul. And if there's somebody in the family who died of diabetes and their life has not been sweet enough, and they're carrying that energy of life is just too bitter, it's not sweet enough, I have diabetes, that is a wound. If their spirit didn't get to the light, then the DNA which is passed down energetically affects everybody in the lineage. My grandfather died of diabetes. My uncle died of diabetes. If I ate a normal American diet of sweet rolls and Coca-Cola, I would be diabetic. So I don't do white sugar because my body wouldn't stand for that. And I get all groggy anyway when I eat white sugar. And I don't like to be groggy. I want my mind to be sharp and clear. So if anybody in your DNA lineage has a wound, there's a way in which you resonate to that. It's not your wound, it's somebody else's, but you feel the effects. DNA is kind of like a radio playing, and their radio's playing a sad song, and you hear that sad song and you feel sadness. So we can do healing for people in our ancestral lineage. That's my theory. Yes, certainly the work of Dawson Church, Genie in Your Genes, showed that how it's not just the genes we have, but which ones open up. But this is not so much on the physical level to manifest disease as it is emotional. When there's emotional trauma in your lineage, that resonates in the soul. And when you do healing work with those in your lineage, and then I always try to multiply the benefits. I ask to heal everyone in this lineage, in this DNA stream. Just lift it from everybody, because William Tiller taught us that there's something that's called a coupled system. It's like there's a train going to heaven, and you just jump on one of the cars, and you go to heaven too without all the tapping. That the meridian system is an energetic system that one can couple to. Gary Craig talked about it as borrowing the benefits. I like to, every time we do a healing, to multiply the benefits, to broadcast that coupled system for healing that exact variety of mental disorder, to couple that and invite everybody else to jump on the train that has that problem and go to the world of light too. Because our planet has around it, there's like a cloud of darkness of all the people that have been killed in wars and were terrified and are still there. And as we lift that and multiply the benefits, then that cloud dissipates and more light can come into the planet. Yes. We are all one. We all breathe the same air, and this astral cloud of trauma around our planet is something that we all breathe and feel. Jung called it the collective unconscious. There's a web of life, and we're Each person is like one intersection in that web. Somebody's tugging here, you feel it. I don't listen to the news. I don't read it on my computer. I don't watch television. I will watch a movie, but the TV ads, they bombard us with all this kind of stuff. I don't go into the negativity because the news is designed to create fear and trauma, and it's addictive. You want to see what's going to happen next, and it gets you all worked up inside. So I spend my spare time working outside in my yard, tending my flowers, making things, crafts, pendulums, cooking, reading, writing. But I don't have time to let the news feed me scary thoughts. I also believe that there has to be a higher plan somewhere. I'm not sure what it is, but that there is a way. What I've seen in my own life, every time something bad happens, it gets turned around for good. And I believe that that's happening now. Christine Page teaches that we have a window from 2012 to 2028, 16 years, when we can collectively make a shift from third dimensional power struggles up to fourth dimension where love rules, and up to the higher part, love, peace, and joy. And we have 10 more years to do that. We've had 6 so far. What I see in my practice is that people heal faster and faster and faster. My students learn faster and faster. When I first started teaching them self-testing, only a few got it right away, and some never got it, and some took a long time to learn it, and now everybody gets it right away. How does that happen? How do Well, thank you. But it's also the 100th monkey thing. There's something that's going into the collective that everybody who does their own healing puts another drop in the ocean of healing that everybody shares. And people are waking up. People are saying, I don't want somebody telling me everything I have to do. I want to think for myself. I want to check in what's really right for my soul and follow that. And as Ohio, yes, one of the most conservative states. I'm kind of an implant. Well, the worst thing about the ET problem is fear. So it starts out talking about different ET races, and I believe that whales came from another planet. I've been going to swim in the wild with humpback whales. I've gone 8 different years so far, and I'm going again next year. Now, a whale doesn't look much like a person. They have an extra lobe in their brain. They're really well equipped for water and not so good at walking around on land. They're ETs. They came here from a different planet named Oceania. And they carry the records of our civilization. Now, what's so scary about a whale, right? Not so bad. And according to the work of Zecharia Sitchin, sheep were brought here from the planet Nibiru when civilization was developing. So we'd have meat and wool. So sheep might be ETs. And then I talk about different ET races and what interaction they've had with people and what that means for us. So it kind of more familiarity with the variety of things that are coming. I cover the grays, the tall whites, the regulans, the andromedans. Some of it, a lot of it comes from my practice, from clients who have had interaction, and also from clients who have had lifetimes in different cultures, on different stars, in different ET races. Some of it is from reading, and some is from direct experience. No, it's only legal in 2 places in the whole world. One is in the Dominican Republic, off the shores of the northern part of the Dominican Republic. We go out 85 miles, drop anchor, and then live on the boat for a week and go out in little boats and look for whale spouts and then snorkel and watch them. It's amazing. I go through a company called Aquatic Adventures at aquaticadventures.com. The other place it's legal is in the Tonga in India. Now, sometimes the whales don't know the rules, and somebody will be swimming off the coast of Bermuda, and a whale will come up to look at them. They don't know it's not legal to be in the water with whales there, but they break the rules, and if they break the rules, so be it. It's magical. I know we're almost out of time here, but I want to tell of an interaction I had with a whale the first time I went. There's a whale I called Minerva, and she had a little baby. We named her Pearl. Now, the mama whales don't do collective babysitting. This mama whale is in charge of her youngster 24/7. So we come upon the whale and the mama, and mama goes down for a 20-minute nap so she can have a little rest, and baby whale goes down. They can only hold their breath 5 minutes, and then they have to come up for a breath. So the baby comes up for a breath and then swims over to us people like, oh my goodness, look at you, you're so interesting. We have like a yellow snorkel and a black and a blue and a red and these fins on our feet. And then the babies will show off. They'll do flips, they'll breach, they'll swim around, they'll slap their tails, slap their fins. It's just delightful. And so this mama let us watch her baby all day long, and then she got a rest. And at one point I was communicating with the whale, and I said, I love you. And what I experienced was a pop around my energy field. And I felt like I had been a goldfish in a goldfish bowl. And that bowl popped off, and all of a sudden, the whole ocean was my swimming ground. And she communicated a thought to me, which is for me and all of us. Be all you can be. Be all you can be, and pop, and there was this freedom there. I said, wow, that's really cool. What I noticed after that, there was a pattern that changed in my life, and the pattern was this: no matter what I was doing, there was a critical voice there. If I was pulling the weeds in my garden, the voice said, you should be answering your email. And if I was answering the email, the voice said, you should be weeding your garden. It didn't matter what I did. It always said I should be doing something else, like this self-critical thing. And that popped off. It's gone. And now I weed the garden and enjoy that, and answer my email and enjoy that. It's so different. It feels like she popped off something that was limiting me by making me criticize myself. So I offer that for everybody, to let go of that and really be all you can be, our full human potential. Okay, well, I'm sure if we colonize other places, we'll need chickens and they'll lay eggs, and that would be great. Oh, maybe it got picked up by a ship and taken. Hey, what a ride. It happened. I would say if you're a healer or interested in healing, thinking about becoming a healer, check out some different healing methods and find out which one really feels right for you. There's such a smorgasbord of a variety of things. The people who are right for the soul detective training I do are the ones who already have in their practice people who are caught in the underworld of they're being invaded by things, they're having things go bump in the night. They've already got the problems I deal with, and they need help to deal with those things. And it takes courage, and you have to work on yourself and heal your own wounds. So it's kind of a depth method, the soul detective method. Some other methods are, they stay more on the surface. They're more for healthy people to be healthier, and those are great to find what resonates to your soul and do that. Well, I think it's great fun to do this work. And what I think is hilarious is when I'm working, I shouldn't laugh, but I'm working with the dark force entity, interviewing it for its purpose. And it'll say, well, my job is to cause as much pain and suffering as possible. And I will say, you're really good at that. You're really good at that. We're going to get you a job promotion, and I know you're going to be good at your next job. And it'll say, well, yes, I'm the best. I know I'm feeding ego, but that's all they're made of. And it makes a connection. And then when they discover they've been lied to about the light, and it's really wonderful, they get mad that they've been lied to. Of course, they're lying to everybody else, and that's okay. And then to see that transformation of that I'm big and bad to realizing the Creator still loves them, wants them back, it's such a beautiful, joyful thing to see that transformation. It makes more light on the planet, and it gives us all hope. If God can love and redeem even the worst, baddest demon entities, certainly those of us who are trying our best and just make a few mistakes now and then, there's hope for everyone. Now, that's a big question, Gail. How did these angels fall from connection to source? And there are a lot of different theories on that, but what I think may be going on is that it's a reptilian type program, and we all have a reptilian brain that we just want to survive, but that there is an actual reptilian race that feeds upon our suffering, and they have done dirty tricks to God's angels. Like they'll send a message to an angel on the edge of heaven and say, there's something really bad going on down here, you're needed. And the angel says, oh, I'll be right there. And they jump without proper protection or education. And then the reptilians somehow disconnect them from source and use them for causing more suffering. I mean, that's the nearest model I can get to. So when reptilians come up, I use an intervention of asking the Arcturians to help, because Arcturus was once invaded by reptilians, and they found a way to deal with the reptilians, and it's this. They send him a tractor beam of unconditional love. They zap him with love. Take that. All that love, and the reptilians can't resist it because it's the one thing they don't have is love. And they kind of waft them off the planet with their tractor beams of unconditional love.